Hoghton Tower, with its atmospheric Tudor architecture and dark history, is one of Lancashire's most intriguing landmarks. The structure, built in the early 1500s, offers an impressive glimpse into England's past. Its long driveway setting the stage for an imposing castle-like estate with a rich heritage. Throughout its history, Hoghton Tower has hosted numerous famous guests. Sir William Shakespeare is rumored to have stayed there, possibly finding inspiration for his works, while Charles Dickens is thought to have drawn ideas from its dramatic halls. King James I once dined at Hoghton Tower, famously knighting a loin of beef, hence coining the term sirloin. However, the stories of ghostly residents add a thrilling layer. Visitors frequently recount chilling encounters with a Tudor woman who strolls the courtyard, a little girl who haunts the halls, and a spectral monk seen within the house's chapel. Disembodied laughter, whispers, and eerie sounds echo through the halls. The mysterious Black Dog of Hoghton Tower is another long-standing legend, reportedly seen darting in and out of shadows. The cellars and dungeons are steeped in dark history as well. It's said they held prisoners during the Lancashire witch trials of 1612, during which 12 accused witches were brought to trial, leading to a grim series of executions. As the evening shadows deepen, Hoghton Tower takes on an even more foreboding presence. The stone walls seem to absorb the fading light, casting the corridors into a maze of darkened alcoves and shadowy recesses. The tour group, initially chatting and laughing as they gathered outside, has grown quieter, their footsteps softened as they move inside. The guide, a seasoned storyteller with a knack for weaving suspense, begins with the tale of the Tudor woman, whose translucent form has been seen drifting across the cobbled courtyard. Some say she was a noblewoman who died tragically, her spirit bound to Hoghton Tower as she awaits something or someone. The guide's voice drops, recounting tales from visitors who claimed to feel a chill sweep over them as they passed through the courtyard, as if an unseen presence brushed against them. Next, the guide leads them to a small, stone-walled chamber, where the ghost of a little girl is rumored to reside. Her story is one of sorrow, a child who lived and died within these walls, and whose laughter still echoes softly, unervingly sweet yet hollow. Some say she searches for her family, lost long ago. The guide gestures toward a cold, dusty corner where small, childlike footprints have mysteriously appeared overnight, despite the locked doors. As they proceed down a narrow, spiraling staircase, the air turns damp and heavy, and the sound of the group's footsteps echoes, as if someone or something is following close behind. They descend into the underground passages, where the dungeon walls seem to close in. The flickering torchlight creates shifting shadows, which seem almost alive. The guide pauses, allowing the silence to settle, and then tells the harrowing tale of the Lancashire witch trials, during which these very cells held suspected witches before they faced the hangman's noose. One visitor shudders, glancing over their shoulder into the inky blackness of an adjoining tunnel. A faint whisper seems to seep from the walls, a low murmur that's gone as quickly as it came. It's just the wind, they reassure themselves, though doubt lingers in their eyes. Finally, they reach the chapel, a space so thick with history that the very air feels stifling. The guide's voice drops to a murmur, recounting sightings of a solitary monk who drifts through the pews. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story. The monk, as the guide explains, is a figure whose face is hidden beneath a deep hood, his form barely visible in the dim light of the chapel. He is said to be a restless spirit, condemned to walk the chapel for eternity, though no one knows why. Some speculate he was a priest forced to abandon his faith under unspeakable circumstances. Others say he was a recluse who died in sorrow. His shadowy figure has been spotted by many visitors, sometimes lingering at the altar, other times slipping silently into the walls. A faint scratching sound echoes from behind the chapel's stone walls, causing a few in the group to jump. The guide reassures them it's only the settling of the old stones. But the group moves on with quickened steps. They pass through more twisting corridors until they come to the Hall of Mirrors, where reflections seem to shift in unnatural ways. The guide recounts the tale of a maidservant who glimpsed her own reflection smiling back at her when she hadn't moved a muscle. The mirrors are said to trap pieces of the past, replaying fragments of moments long forgotten. Some visitors claim they've seen figures move within the glass, caught in moments from other times. With trepidation, the group steps carefully around the mirrors, careful not to glance directly into the reflective surfaces, as though they fear catching an unwanted glimpse of what or who might look back at them. The guide then pauses at the entrance to the cellar. Here, they say, is where the real weight of Hoghton Tower's history lies. The door creaks open, and a musty smell wafts up, mingling with the scent of damp earth and aged wood. The cellar stretches out like a maze beneath the house, with passageways that wind and twist in disorienting directions. This is where prisoners were once held, where whispers of pain and fear still seem to linger in the air. As they descend, the guide shares one final tale: the black dog of Hoghton Tower. This creature, they say, is no ordinary animal. It appears only at night, with eyes that glow like embers and a coat as dark as midnight. Some believe it's an omen of death. Others insist it's a protective spirit, a silent guardian of the tower's secrets. The guide's voice drops to a hushed tone as they explain that the black dog has been seen prowling the grounds for centuries. It appears out of nowhere, slinking along the shadowed edges of the courtyard or waiting at the foot of the tower's staircases, watching as if gauging each visitor, deciding who may pass unbothered and who should beware. Those who have seen it up close describe an unnerving intelligence in its eyes, something far more aware than any earthly creature. As the group listens, a low, distant growl seems to reverberate through the cellar. Several people gasp, glancing nervously down the dark passageway from which they entered, half expecting to see a pair of glowing eyes watching them. But the hall remains empty, the echo fading into silence. They continue deeper, led into the labyrinthine heart of the cellar, where the walls feel as though they're closing in. The only light is the wavering beam of the guide's lantern, casting fleeting shadows on the damp stone walls. Suddenly, the guide stops and points to an inconspicuous door, its wood warped and splintered with age. This, they say quietly, is said to be where one of the witches was held before her trial. She left marks on the door scratches, as though trying to claw her way out. The group leans in, peering at faint, jagged grooves carved into the wood. The sight sends a shiver through everyone, as if the air itself grows colder near the door, thick with a lingering sadness and fury. As they press on, they reach a larger chamber, where the ceiling arches overhead in a low dome. It was here, the guide says, that prisoners were brought together before their fates were decided. The walls bear faint markings, symbols etched into the stone, their meaning long forgotten but rumored to be a desperate attempt at casting protective spells or invoking spirits for mercy. One member of the group moves closer, fascinated by the carvings, running their fingers gently along the stone's rough surface. Just then, an icy draft rushes through the chamber, blowing out the lantern's flame. The room is plunged into darkness, and in the pitch black, a faint whispering begins, soft, unintelligible, but unmistakably there, like voices trapped between these walls for centuries. The whispers grow louder, overlapping in a chaotic murmur, swirling around the group like a rising wind. Panic begins to set in as the whispers swell, weaving through the darkness like a gathering storm. The guide fumbles with the lantern, desperately trying to relight it, but the flame refuses to catch. One of the guests shouts, their voice trembling, as a cold, invisible presence brushes past them, the sensation as chilling as ice on bare skin. Another guest backs away, their eyes wide with fear, catching a fleeting glimpse of shadowy forms flickering in the darkness, like figures reaching out, straining against the boundary between worlds. Finally, the guide's hands steady, and the lantern's flame flickers back to life, casting an eerie glow over the group's faces, pale with fright. The room is empty, silent, the shadows retreating back into the corners, but an unsettling sense lingers, as though something unseen is still watching. The guide, attempting to mask their own unease, urges the group onward, though everyone's nerves are frayed and glances are cast constantly over shoulders, wary of what might be following them in the shadows. The group winds through more tunnels, and just as they reach a narrow stone archway, a faint, ghostly laughter echoes through the passage. It's the sound of a child, sweet yet hollow, bouncing off the cold stone walls, growing louder with each step. Some members of the group freeze, whispering that it must be the spirit of the little girl, the one seen roaming the halls, searching, always searching. The guide urges them forward, but one guest can't resist and peers around the next corner, eyes scanning the dark for any sign of movement. For an instant, they swear they see her. A small figure in an old-fashioned dress, her face obscured by shadows, standing at the far end of the corridor, watching them. But as quickly as she appears, she's gone, leaving only the faint echo of her laughter and the cold draft she left in her wake. The guide leads them quickly out of the cellar and back into the upper halls. But the strange occurrences do not end. As they pass through the great dining room, the air grows thick, and a faint scent of smoke fills their noses. Some swear they hear the clink of goblets and the soft murmur of voices, as if a grand feast were taking place just beyond the veil of time. At the head of the table, the shadows seem to form the faint outline of a figure seated in a high-backed chair, his form regal and unmoving. Could it be the spirit of King James himself, eternally presiding over a feast that ended centuries ago? The group continues, drawn deeper into the house's mysteries, until they reach the main staircase. The black dog's legend haunts each step as they ascend, some unable to shake the feeling that something is climbing the steps just behind them, paws padding silently, eyes watching their every move. As they reach the top of the staircase, the group halts, listening. The silence is thick, oppressive, as if the very air is waiting. Someone in the back gasps they felt something brush past, a cold, quick sensation that vanishes just as suddenly. The guide glances down the shadowed stairwell, where faint impressions of paw prints now seem to dot the dusty steps, trailing up from the darkness below. It's as though the black dog has come to accompany them, a silent guardian or perhaps a sinister stalker. They move cautiously into the long, dim corridor ahead, where portraits of past residents line the walls, their eyes following the group as they pass. The guide explains that one painting, a stern-faced nobleman, has been known to change expression. Some say his lips curl into a sneer when he's displeased. Others claim his eyes seem to flicker with a hidden fire. One guest stops to look closer, and just then, the portrait's expression shifts, the corners of his mouth turning up ever so slightly, a smug, knowing smile. The guest stumbles back, heart racing, as the portrait's expression quickly settles back to normal. Pressing onward, the group finally arrives at a large, ornate door, the entrance to the north wing, a section of the house reputed to be the most haunted. This area, the guide warns, has long been closed off, as few dare to linger here. They unlock the door and enter a vast, shadow-filled room, its high ceilings lost in darkness. Dust hangs thick in the air, and the faded remains of rich tapestries drape along the walls, depicting scenes of battle and revelry from centuries past. The guide leads them to the center of the room, where a large, antique cradle rests, still and silent. It belonged to a child who once lived here, they explain, a young heir who passed away in infancy. The cradle is said to rock on its own, and visitors have reported hearing the faint sound of a lullaby when they stand near it. As the guide speaks, a soft creaking fills the room, the cradle moving ever so slightly, as if an unseen hand were soothing a restless child. A chill ripples through the group, and one of the guests whispers that they can hear the faintest hum of a lullaby, mingling with the creaking, soft and sorrowful. The guide takes a step back, suggesting they leave the cradle undisturbed. But just as they turn toward the door, an icy breeze sweeps through the room, tugging at their clothes, swirling dust into the air. The door they came through slams shut with a resounding bang, the sound echoing through the north wing like a cannon shot. A heavy silence falls, broken only by the faint echo of that spectral lullaby, seeming to grow louder, filling the room with an eerie, lingering sorrow. One by one, the candles lining the room's edges flicker and extinguish, plunging them into near-total darkness. The only remaining light comes from a single high window, casting faint moonlight that stretches across the floor like ghostly fingers. The faint moonlight spills across the room, illuminating the cradle, which now rocks more vigorously, as if some invisible force is swaying it back and forth. The lullaby grows louder, filling the darkened space with a haunting, echoing melody that twists around the guests like a spectral embrace. Hearts pounding, they huddle closer, their breath fogging the air as an unnatural chill settles over them. The guide's voice shakes as they attempt to reassure the group, but their words falter even they cannot deny the unearthly presence that surrounds them. Just then, a figure materializes near the window, barely more than a shadow, with outlines that seem to waver like smoke. Its form is small, childlike, with what seems to be a delicate hand reaching toward the cradle, an expression of yearning frozen on its indistinct face. The lullaby shifts, growing softer, sadder, as if the spirit senses their presence, sensing the sudden intrusion into its restless vigil. A few in the group step back, unable to bear the overwhelming sense of sorrow that fills the room, as though centuries of longing and loss are bearing down on them. One brave guest approaches the cradle, compelled by some unknown force, their hand outstretched as if to comfort the unseen child. But as their fingers brush the edge of the cradle, the figure at the window vanishes, the lullaby cutting off abruptly, leaving only a ringing silence in its wake. The cradle stops rocking, the room suddenly still, as though holding its breath. The group barely has a moment to process what just happened when a loud knock echoes from the opposite end of the room, behind another closed door that none had noticed before. The sound is deliberate, forceful, as if demanding their attention. The guide hesitates, their expression a mixture of fear and curiosity. Summoning their courage, they lead the group toward the door, explaining in a hushed tone that it was once the private quarters of a reclusive ancestor known for dabbling in the occult, rumored to have sealed dark secrets within these walls. As they reach the door, it creaks open on its own, revealing a room bathed in shadow, lined with dusty shelves filled with ancient books and strange artifacts. A heavy, oppressive feeling fills the space, as though they've stepped into another realm entirely. In the center of the room stands an ancient writing desk, covered in faded parchments marked with strange symbols and drawings of creatures not quite human. One guest steps closer to inspect the symbols, but a sudden gust of frigid air sweeps through, scattering the papers and revealing a dark, heavy book bound in cracked leather. The guide's eyes widen, recognizing it as the rumored asterisk Book of Shadows, a grimoire said to contain spells and secrets collected over generations. Just as someone reaches out to touch it, a deep, guttural growl rumbles from somewhere nearby, low and menacing, like the warning of a beast lying in wait. The black dog. The air thickens, charged with a sense of dread, as though the spirit of the dog itself has emerged, guarding the tower's forbidden secrets. The group freezes, caught between the shadowed doorway and the ominous growl echoing from within. The air is thick, each breath heavy with tension as the unmistakable, menacing form of the black dog begins to take shape in the corner of the room. Its eyes glint like embers, fixated on them, and a deep snarl rises from its throat, a warning reverberating through the silence. The guide, voice shaking, steps forward, holding up a hand as if to appease the spirit. They murmur softly, a few words of respect, perhaps hoping to calm the spectral guardian. The dog's growl fades, its intense gaze never wavering. It seems to consider them, weighing their intentions. Then, slowly, it begins to back away, fading into the shadows until only its glowing eyes remain then. With one final blink, they, too, vanish. A collective sigh of relief escapes the group. But before they can turn to leave, a faint, whispering voice fills the room. It's indistinct at first, but gradually, the words become clearer. They speak of lost souls, secrets bound within the tower, and a warning to leave while they still can. One by one, the candles in the room flicker back to life, illuminating the strange symbols, casting eerie shadows that dance across the ancient grimoire. Realizing they've seen enough, the guide leads the group back through the winding corridors, retracing their steps to the entrance. The tower seems to release its grip on them, the walls easing back, the oppressive silence lifting. As they step into the night air, a profound stillness settles over them, as though the spirits of Hoghton Tower are watching, satisfied that the trespassers have left their secrets undisturbed. Looking back, one guest catches a glimpse of the tower, bathed in moonlight, where a shadowy figure stands in the highest window. The figure raises a hand in a silent farewell or perhaps a final warning. And just before they turn away, the faint, chilling sound of a child's laughter echoes across the courtyard, fading into the night as the gates close behind them. They leave Hoghton Tower with pounding hearts, the haunting stories and lingering spirits forever etched into their memories. The tower stands silent and watchful once more, its secrets safe, for now.